Welcome to Wizeup. I'm Paul Arthur. Talking federal election, of course, again, and this time, though, firearms legislation in Canada is part of the election, and every time we have a federal election, it becomes an issue for sure. Our federal Liberal government certainly believes in stricter gun controls, and they believe that will reduce gun violence. On the other hand, hunters, sport shooters, ranchers, they disagree. By the way, so do many police associations across this nation. They also disagree on that. So our guest joins us from the Vancouver area, Rod Giltaca. He's the CEO of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, their website, firearmrights.ca. And also they have another website going right now called nomoorebans.ca. So we'll touch base on the bans that are there. So Rod, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Looking forward to the conversation here. First off, maybe can you give our viewers an update on where we're currently at with some of the changes to our firearms legislations that started, I think, back in 2020 with Bill C-71 and then again with Bill C-21 as it relates to handguns and so-called assault weapons?
Well, there's a lot there. So
yeah.
if I were to run at light speed and summarize it.
Yeah, just a brief overview then, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to try to make that as brief as humanly possible. But basically, I think most people are aware that back in on May 1st, 2020, there was a massive gun ban. These were labeled as assault-style weapons. Assault weapons themselves have been banned in Canada since 1977. Virtually nobody, no private individuals, have access to those firearms and haven't for decades. Well, almost half a century, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, half a century, actually. That the bans continued. The RCMP continued to ban more guns without any oversight. Remember, this was all done with an order in council. This wasn't done using legislation.
Right.
The RCMP continued to ban guns as variants or versions of these now prohibited firearms. Then there's Bill C-21 that made it unlawful to impossible really, to transfer a handgun from one licensed individual to another. And it also created a definition of assault-style firearm. And then there were more bans to come. There were two subsequent bans, again, by order in council, and then followed up by the RCMP banning more guns based on those orders in council. And where we sit today is there are no magazine-fed, removable magazine centerfire semi-automatic rifles that are legal in Canada. They're all prohibited. There are only a handful of semi-automatic 22 caliber rifles left. They banned virtually all of them other than the Ruger 1022 and the Mossberg Plinkster and a couple of others. And the RCMP continues to ban guns on an ongoing basis based on whatever it is, the variant status of newly prohibited firearms. And so gun owners, licensed gun, remember, all of this applies exclusively to licensed gun owners, right? So sport shooters, collectors, people that are inheriting firearms or no longer can, but would have.
Yeah, I mean, these are people who have been vetted by the RCMP. Okay. They've received training. You can't get your license without a training course and so forth. So, it's a little bit like preaching to the choir, isn't it?
And you get a criminal record check every 24 hours. Your name is run through CPIC because if you were stopped on the side of the road and suspected of committing a criminal offense, that's when your name is run through CPIC. We get that every 24 hours. It's just, anyway, this is all about licensed gun owners and prohibiting and confiscating firearms from only those people. None of this affects criminals. So this has been, it's been quite an adventure and unlike anything that's happened in Canadian history.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange duck. Okay. Now, the federal government under Justin Trudeau introduced this legislation to a buyback mandate, right, which basically forces gun owners to surrender their banned weapons to the government. They would ostensibly, buy them back at fair market value. Has that actually started yet? And if so, how many guns have they rounded up, and at what cost to the taxpayer?
So the probably the most important part of all this is individual gun owners. So the answer is no and zero. So
and at what cost, by the way? What's the cost on that?
Well, they've already spent something, I don't know, whatever it is.
I heard it was $75 million. I don't know. I mean, that's round figures, but
Yeah, $100 million, and they haven't done anything. What they are rolling out is they're trying to roll out the retail buyback. And there's an interesting story here, Paul, because if you remember back on May 1st, 2020, the promise was, hey, we're respecting law-abiding gun owners. You haven't done anything to deserve any of this stuff, but these 22 caliber rifles and bolt actions that are too powerful, they don't belong. These are assault weapons. They said they were going to roll out a buyback as soon as humanly possible. That was over 5 years ago. Actually, yeah, 5 years ago, pardon me. And nothing, like literally nothing. They keep stringing people who, will vote for gun control along for literally half a decade. Now, there's two components to it, right? There's a buyback for individuals, which would probably cost somewhere around $5 to $10 billion, like not even exaggerating.
Well, that's
of course, and you'd have to borrow that money, right? At interest.
Mind-boggling. Yeah.
And then the retail buyback. Well, businesses have been sitting for 5 years on tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars worth of inventory. The government said you just can't sell, and you have to sit on it for half a decade. Now they're saying that they're rolling out this, and it's actually ended a lot of businesses. So now they're saying, we're going to roll this retail buyback. The retail buyback, Paul, is so easy. Send us your invoices for the guns you can't sell.
Right.
We'll send you back a check with plus 10% for, making your life so difficult and trying to bankrupt you. And then
so why hasn't that happened?
It's just very interesting. The whole thing is interesting. It just the whole thing doesn't add up, really.
Wow. Okay, yeah, that's concerning. I mean, you're quite right. That makes sense. It would be a lot easier to do that. You'd get a lot more compliance from, gun owners or the businesses, pardon me, because they're we know where they are, right? Now, if you have to go door to door knocking on doors, it's not going to go so well in Alberta and Saskatchewan, and even Ontario, I think, is kind of resisted that. The provincial governments aren't keen on that, so a lot more difficult for the RCMP to come in and do that. So, not sure how that's going to happen. Now, of course, we have a federal election underway. Mark Carney's promising change, and so let me ask, are the federal Liberals making any changes to that existing firearm legislation that we have in place now, the gun buyback program, all that kind of stuff? Are they going to keep everything as same with these bans, or are they making any changes?
Well, they're going to intensify, right?
Oh,
they're going to intensify this. And what I think what a lot of people don't understand is the way the law has been written in Bill C-21 that was passed, almost 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. There's a muzzle energy limit to the guns that you can own. So all 50 calibers are now prohibited in Canada. Anything that is for a 460 caliber and over. And what they can do is once they get all of these guns back, hunters used to be at the back of the line, right? Of gun confiscation. Sport shooters and collectors were at the front. Well, now we're all gone. I have $35,000 worth of firearms that I haven't been able to use for 5 years, right? So I'm out of the queue. Now hunters are at the front of the line. And what they're going to do is once they have all the guns back that they've banned so far, they're going to start ratcheting down that limit because nobody needs a 30-06 Springfield. That was a cartridge designed for warfare. So they'll just keep ratcheting that down all the way to the point where nobody has anything. And these are the signals they're sending. And they do that while saying nothing that we're doing is intended to or has any impact on the lawful activities of sport shooting and hunting. When they've destroyed sport shooting in Canada, it's over. Clubs have started to close down. So, again.
So there's a very real tangible impact it's having on again, hunters, ranchers, sport shooters, that sort of thing. So, okay. Now, if someone is in favor of strict gun control, and of course there are many people in Canada who are, then certainly a vote for the Liberal Party is an option for them. Let me ask, which other parties are also supporting strict gun control like this?
Well, the NDP have supported the Liberals' agenda on gun control. Not that they're really even a factor anymore. They're down to 6% in the polls. And Mr. Singh has basically destroyed the NDP. And then the two Greens for whatever part they play in all this. And the Bloc Québécois went along with all the Liberals' gun control agenda as well. Yeah. There's
Okay.
only really one party that's standing against this, saying we're going to lock criminals up and people that do bad things, and will leave licensed gun owners alone, which is the Conservative Party. It's turned into quite a partisan issue.
Okay. So they are. Would they actually repeal Bill C-71 and C-21, or no? I'm not sure where they're at there.
Well, Pierre Poilievre has promised, I don't know how many times. I'm sure it's in the dozens,
Okay.
if not slightly less than 100, because we watch these kinds of things. And he said, I'm going to reverse everything the Liberals have done. And that might seem
With
like,
respect to gun control specifically, you're saying?
yes, in the
Okay.
last 10 years.
Okay.
And, I've spoken to him, or my colleagues have spoken to him. He's like, I will absolutely do that. Because if you
Okay.
think about it, Paul, look at the crime and chaos and violence that has been unleashed on Canada over the last 10 years. The most peaceful time, as far as violent crime is considered and firearm-related violence is considered, was in 2014, the year before the Liberals won in 2015. That was the lowest firearm-related crime numbers that we had ever seen in Canadian history. And none of this gun control that the Liberals have rolled out over the last decade existed. And how really is that possible if all of this is going to make Canadians safer? It almost looks like it's done the opposite. I'm not implying that more gun control creates more violence. But at the same time as the Liberals got in and started hammering down on licensed gun owners and gun clubs and hunters and sport shooters and collectors, they came out with Bill C-75, which basically says, even if you murder police officers in cold blood and you're caught red-handed, the judge needs to turn you back out onto the street without delay.
Yeah.
And we've seen the results of that. And we also had Bill C-5, another Liberal bill that that side of the political spectrum supported. Okay, all of them supported it. And that lowered sentencing on firearm-related violence and terrorism and kidnapping and all these crazy charges. So basically, you can have someone that shot a police officer or whatever in cold blood, was caught. They could have house arrest, right?
Yes.
And so this is what has fueled that, and some other socioeconomic factors have fueled all this violence in Canada. And I'll end by saying, I know it's a long answer, but I'll end by saying this. It is of the utmost importance that Canadians really figure this stuff out, understand why you're seeing all these negative effects. They all come from government policy and work their way down through everyday life. We need to reverse all this stuff, and people need to stop listening to the propaganda. There's a reason why there's all this violence, and there's a reason why they're focusing on licensed gun owners, because the violence won't stop, and they also get to use the government to hurt the people that are unlikely to vote for them. So,
yeah, this is actually quite important. It really is. And I think we need to set ideology aside and just logically think it through step by step. Because now, reality is, I'll extend grace here as well. I mean, the groups that are pushing for gun control, I think they genuinely believe that doing so will increase public safety. Okay? So we both want the same thing. We want reduced violence, where you don't want to see people getting murdered or hurt by guns or any other means. So how do we go about doing that? And there's different methods of doing that. So we need to look at which methods are actually producing results. So that's my question is, what do the stats actually tell us? With gun bans being put in place, is it reducing, gun violence? Is it increasing public safety? And from what I've seen, it doesn't seem to be the case. Can you shed some light on that?
It absolutely isn't the case. And again, for all the reasons we just talked about.
Right.
So to legally own firearms in Canada, there's always been strict laws, gun laws in Canada. And, people talk about it's like, we need common sense laws. And it's such a deceptive argument. It implies that there are no laws, or that the laws are somehow insufficient. Firearms have always been strictly controlled in Canada. If you want to improve this tiny little sliver compared to overall firearm-related violence, this tiny sliver that might involve people that have a firearms license, because it does happen, because the world isn't perfect, right? If you want to do it, then increase the vetting. That's very easy. I'll give you an example. So as a process in the when you apply for a firearms license in Canada, part of the process is you have to provide, your spouse has to sign off if you're married. If you're not married, you have to reveal all of your conjugal partners for 2 years and contact information. You have to provide 2 references that have known you 3 years or longer, and their contact information. And you may be interviewed, your references, your conjugal partners, and your spouse before you ever get a firearms license. Now, that's probably the most important part of the entire vetting process. And you know what? The Canadian Firearms Program provided information to a House. There was an order paper question from the Conservatives. What is the percentage of applicants that have their references called, or any references called, or are interviewed themselves? And the answer was 10%.
10%. So 90% of so 90% of gun owners have not actually been vetted by the RCMP. Other than criminal record checks, that sort of thing. They don't phone, hey, you signed here that you're a character witness to this person. Is he going to be, going off as a rocker and shooting up the school or something, No, they just don't call him.
Or did you actually sign it, right? Did you sign this? Are you aware of it, right?
Wow.
So, here's the interesting thing, Paul, is that even though the vetting system they haven't truly implemented the law to its actual potential, even now, after this has been the law for 35 years. But even though that is a problem that I've identified as the gun lobby, by the way, right? Firearm-related violence committed by licensed gun owners almost doesn't exist. There have been situations of it, but it almost doesn't exist. It's like 99% of the violence are people that are unlicensed using smuggled firearms from, and again, that ratio varies depending on demographics, areas of the country, all that stuff. Like that's real, but they won't touch these people. They've made it easier for them to commit offenses and get back on the street. So for liberals, it's a win-win. It's a hot political wedge issue. The longer it rages on, the more political hay they can make with it, and Canadians suffer the consequences.
I'll be honest, I don't care much about party colors in the sense that, I'll vote for whatever party. If you're the Communist Party, I'll vote for you if your values line up with mine. That's what I'm looking for, okay? And my values tend to be, yes, we want to see some safety, public safety, some common sense, some, freedom. No, I don't like going into debt, all these different kinds of things, whatever. So on this particular issue, I want to see people kept safe, and it's not working. So I want to go look for a party that's actually going to keep us safe. So so why are so many police associations across the country saying the gun control isn't working? You're targeting the wrong people. And it's just as you just described here, the violence is coming from drug gangs, basically, for the most part. Yes, sometimes there's other things, but the vast majority of that seems to be coming from that kind of part of society, I guess. And the weapons being used are coming across the border illegally. So what's the solution that makes sense? It would be, to me anyway, let's tighten up our border security. Let's make sure those smuggled weapons get caught. Let's assign more, police power to the gangs, etc., and try to make a difference and change your sentencing as well, so you don't get released right away. That makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and I typically, I used to vote Liberal.
Okay.
Because as an individual, I'm just talking about myself, right? Yep. I'm a centrist. Mm-hmm. And I was born here in Canada. I remember how Canada used to be. I truly did believe it was the greatest country in the world.
Yeah.
But, despite, I would never have considered myself a conservative. But interesting, in the modern political landscape, today's conservatives are really the Liberal Party of Paul Martin and Jean Chrétien, right?
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think they may be right.
Yeah, this makes sense. We'll do that. I guess minus the corruption, right? And they recognize, because we work with them, they recognize that the problem is the drug trade, human trafficking, organized crime, and then all of the social determinants of violence, which are poverty, unemployment, lack of opportunity, lack of hope, social moral decline. These are the drivers of violence. And we can readily get guns either from the United States, or you have criminal groups now manufacturing their own firearms, and that is something that they can do, and they have more than enough money and resources to do it. So at the end of the day, What you need to do is leave the law abiding alone because, turning my life upside down, shaking me down, blaming the liberals, blaming me and the Bloc and the NDP and the Greens, let's say, blaming people like me for their failures in public safety damages my relationship with them. At the same time, they are putting my family at risk by letting these criminals run all over the place and do whatever it is that they want. I assure you, Paul, if, when I mean this towards all the anti-gun groups and regular everyday Canadians that are pro-gun control, if I thought for a split second that any of this would make Canada safer, I would be advocating for it. I have 2 adult children. They live downtown Vancouver, which has turned into more or less a hellscape, right? I would do whatever it took to keep them safe, and I would be agreeing with all of this stuff. I promise you that. So anyway, yeah, and they're going back to the other point. There's a reason. I don't know. I could be wrong, though. I don't remember ever having police departments, municipal and provincial even, and even the RCMP union representing 28,000 RCMP police officers, ever saying to the government, back off on the gun control.
Yeah.
It's not worth it, and these people don't deserve this. You're doing a terrible job, and it's actually costing Canadians their lives. I've never seen them advocate for a political party before. That's pretty astounding.
It is. I mean, these are the people who know they're dealing with this every day. 365 a year, right? What are you hearing back from ranchers, sport shooters, hunters? Are they feeling like they're being blamed for violent crime in Canada?
Well, yeah, and it's typically, I guess it's what you would think. The people that have lost their guns, they're super angry and they're motivated and they're going to vote. They're going to vote conservative. They're going to do all that stuff. The people that are in the back of that line that still haven't really lost anything, they're still up in the air. Because it's funny, every once in a while I will get a message from a hunter and he's like, oh, you don't need any of these guns to hunt. And I'm like, hey man, listen, I'm the one I'm at the tip of the spear right now. I'm the one that's losing everything. I'm telling you, your turn is coming.
Yeah.
And your position, it's like 2 guys in a rowboat. The guy in the back, the hole's in the front of the boat. The guy in the back's like, luck, and I'm bailing. And he's like, luckily the hole isn't on my side. And it's like, okay, well, you know what? When I'm gone, there's going to be nobody in the front of the line fighting to protect you. And now you're at the front of the line, whether you know it or not. So it's there's an interesting dynamic, but I think most people have woken up and they can see the pattern, right? It's been going on for literally a decade.
Well, it's so often in federal elections, we see the fear factor being leveraged to gain votes. And we need to wake up as Canadians and just, filter through that, okay? What's fact, what is not? Even for the whole tariff thing, et cetera, right? Is Canadian sovereignty under threat? Well, not really. Do you really believe that Trump is going to invade Canada? Come on, give your head a shake. There's not going to be a war between the U.S. and Canada with weapons. It's just not going to happen. That's not reality. But, we'll leave that aside. But when you look at the term assault weapon, that's a pejorative term in one sense, isn't it? What is that? Well, I know the government previously used this description for it, saying, our communities don't need firearms that were designed for the battlefield. That sounds scary, but you're talking the description you just gave here. Bolt action 22s. Like seriously, what when and where would that ever be used on a battlefield? And again, we have magazine capacities of 5, generally speaking, for more high-powered rifles, right? So. Where do you go with that? What's an assault weapon? Why would you call something an assault weapon? Is it because it looks a certain way?
Well, because gun control. Well, just a quick correction.
Okay.
To my knowledge, no bolt action 22s have been banned,
okay.
But virtually every semi-automatic 22 has been banned, other than a couple of them.
Wow.
So, and they'll get to the rest of that if they win.
Wow.
Yeah. So now the term assault weapon is what plays into the reason, because a lot of people are ask me, like, well, why are they doing all this?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose? And it's really 2 things. Number one, they don't think that people like us, I guess the serfs on the land or whatever, should have firearms. Only they should have firearms. Only the military and the police and the people that the government controls. And the media are in on this. Like lots of people are in favor of this. Only the government should have guns, and we should have nothing. Okay, so that's one thing. It's an ideological thing that's been going on for 50 years in Canada.
Yeah.
The Laurentian elites don't believe that you should have anything like that. You're just a unit of consumption, I guess. And the other thing is that they use gun control as wedge politics to scare urban voters. So you have completely disconnected people in downtown Montreal and in downtown Toronto and downtown Vancouver that don't understand any of that. They don't even know where their food comes from. So these are people that are very easily manipulated. So they scare them. They call guns that I own assault weapons, which they aren't. I just mentioned assault weapons were banned in the late 70s in Canada, 1977, right? And, oh, they belong on a battlefield, kill the most amount of people in the shortest amount of time. All this rhetoric. And you're talking about what? Semi-automatic 22s like the Ruger 1022?
Yeah.
Like, are you joking? Are you sending that to Ukraine? So they use this as it's just gaslighting them and trying instilling the fear. Now, you mentioned tariffs before. I know we're not here to talk about that, and so I'm not going to go that direction. But if you think about it, Canada's economy has been in free fall collapse in the last years. So what do? They trash talk Donald Trump and goad him into threatening tariffs at least. And then now they can blame all their failures on the economy on Donald Trump instead of taking accountability for it. Yeah. And they use that to scare urban voters. And I'm
running out of time here. Rod, any final thoughts where this is going? How should concerned Canadians respond to this?
Well, Canadians need to look into things for themselves. They have to think for themselves. Yeah. This is a very critical election, and it's about more than gun control, that's for sure. So vote for your children, vote for your future.
Yeah, and when the safety of Canadians is at risk here, we need to go beyond ideology and look at the facts, right? What will work to stop, guns coming into the hands of criminals? Not this kind of legislation, I wouldn't think. NoMoreBans.ca, FirearmRights.ca, Rod Giltaca, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. And thank you for watching, folks. Wizeup.ca. Tell your friends about us, and don't forget to hit subscribe.